unfortunately for us, in the pandemic, about 1 in 5 women left the workforce for caregiving reasons. Whether they were taking care of children that needed to be educated at home, that couldn't kind of take care of themselves, right? If you have a 4-year-old, they're not going to be able to keep themselves busy on Zoom. And also elderly parents too. And that's part of this notion called the care economy. And as a society and as, I guess, a capitalist society, we've decided not to put value on women's unpaid work. Doesn't add to GDP at all. And so when we don't add these things to GDP, we don't put value on them. So if you think about a car accident, is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's not a trick question. We would say it's a bad thing, right? But when you look at it from a GDP perspective, it's actually a positive to GDP. Because now you have to either buy a new car or get this one fixed. There's an insurance claim. Maybe you need a massage or chiro or a doctor's appointment because you're injured. All of these things are positives to GDP. And yet, a woman taking care of her elderly mother is not seen as a positive to our economy. And I think that it's so interesting. I mean, I don't really think it's that interesting. It's definitely the patriarchy and how we built our society, but it's so interesting on what we've chosen to put value on within our society. And I think even just having that mindset and being aware of that can really help you when you're starting to look at how women can be involved in their finances. And I would say that it is about starting to have those conversations. I don't know how many rooms I've walked into. I used to work in tech where there'd be a group of men and they'd be talking about the new company that they just invested in. And every group of women I walked into was talking about how they went to the mall at lunch or something that had nothing to do with building wealth and money. And I think once we start to have some of these conversations, even in our friend groups and within our families, we start to move the needle. I'm not saying you have to do it all at once. I know it can be extremely overwhelming. It's like a different language, right? There's acronyms, there's words that you've never heard. It's overwhelming, but if you do one thing, one right thing this month for your finances, next month you can do another thing, and this is very, very simple math, but by the end of the year, you'll have done 12 things. And that is gonna put you in a position to get to financial freedom, to get to the ability to have wealth, to actually do something with it, and to create financial security for yourself, which I think at the end of the day, we all want. Nobody wants to be stressed about money. It's one of the leading causes of divorce. It keeps people up at night. You get into credit card debt or those quick cash loans, and you find a lot of people that become financially stressed and in financial despair and may even have to declare bankruptcy, and that's good for no one. So if we start to have these conversations, we will start to move the needle. And the last point I want to make before we jump into our Q&A is also around being a woman, but more specifically around being a mother. I have an almost 3-year-old, which I don't know how that happened. I swear I blinked and he was born and now he's 3. But women have this thing when they become mothers, and it's called the motherhood penalty. And it has been studied for quite a while. I can't actually remember the date off the top of my head, but financially, one of the worst choices a woman can make is to have a child. And I think, again, this goes back to systemically how we view women's worth in the world and how we need to change that. I'm not saying don't have kids. I have a kid. He's wonderful. He's a lot of work. But if you aren't prepared to have those conversations and if you aren't aware of them, you could find yourself, like I did, in the corporate world, being passed over 3 times for a promotion while I was coming up to my mat leave, on my mat leave, and right after I got back from my mat leave. And that really hinders women's earning potential, which, if we think about it, goes all the way back to what we talked about at the beginning. Women earn less than men. And it's not a simple answer, but if you get yourself in the position where you have the information, where you know what your colleagues are being compensated or what fair market value is across the street, if you're investing your money, if you're doing the right things with your finances and building your wealth, we can start to close that wealth gap and that wage gap so that women do have that economic equality. And what that means, to take it one step further, is power. In the world we live in, money is power. That could be power, like I said, to make decisions on what kind of companies you invest in. It could be political power. We know that on average, people that are in politics tend to have more money. And those are the people that make the policies. And I would say that that's, the very last important piece of this. And I always say money is political, whether we want it to be or not. Unfortunately, it is. Look at who you're voting for. Look at who your friends and your family are voting for. And I'm not here to tell anyone who to vote for, but if they're not in support of policies that are helping women's economic advancement, I think we need to maybe take a critical lens at who they are and what they're doing. If they have no women on their team, that can also be another challenge. And I would say the last thing would be how they talk about women in the media. There was a reporter in the Wall Street Journal last year who called Dr. Jill Biden kiddo. Not Joe Biden, Jill, his wife. And so it's conversations, it's little things like this that are almost like microaggressions towards women that do really hold them back.